when we're talking about product, we have to talk about the product life cycle. It is taught in every single college marketing class. Just for grins, I Googled the term with quotes, product life cycle, and there were almost 3.5 million hits. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the concept of the product life cycle, which is universally embraced. But then I'm going to talk about what I consider to be some limitations of it. But let's go ahead and start with the concept of it. This is the way that a product goes through some very, very predictable stages. And the 4 stages are introduction stage, growth stage, maturity stage, and decline stage. So in the introduction stage, and the upper line is sales and the lower line is profits. And so you see the lower line is below zero for a while because you've got all of the costs of developing the product and then introducing the product. So initially you're losing money while you recover those development costs, and sales starts to pick up during this introductory phase, the introduction stage. Next comes the growth stage, where you start to make more profit. Sales just keep climbing up, but at some point growth slows and you reach the maturity stage. That's where sales hit their peak and actually start to go down. That's where profits start to get squeezed. Margins often get squeezed. And then in the decline stage, product sales continue to decline and profits fall. And generally, once it becomes unprofitable, that's when you will get rid of the product, take it out of the market. So there's our predictable product life cycle and the 4 stages of the product life cycle: introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. Conventional marketing strategy suggests that you do different things at each of the stages. So during the introduction stage, your goal is to get people to buy the product. You want to get distribution. You might play with pricing a little bit. Your communication strategy is very, very informative. Then as you move into growth stage, you've got slightly different objectives. You're trying to get more brand loyalty as opposed to just trial. Sales, are going to increase, but you may have competitors, so now you may need to lower prices. You've advertised somewhat heavily, but at some point you might want to slow down on advertising. Then as you reach mature stage, you might want to play with the product and add new features. Because of competition, oftentimes profit margins are squeezed. You probably are cutting way back on marketing communications, just going with reminder advertising. And then ultimately during decline stage, you're just trying to stave off, the inevitable demise. Generally, you're cutting back on marketing spend. Pricing could go either way. You might reduce it to be more competitive, but you might raise it to try to remain profitable longer. You've got less to lose with regard to pricing because the product is already in steep decline. Now, here's the problem with product lifecycle theory, as I see it. Well, for one thing, it's just a theory, although it's been proven again and again and again. But the question is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? In other words, if you follow the conventional strategy, it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you pull back marketing investment when you think you're mature, well, that's going to slow down sales, of course. So one of the problems with product lifecycle is it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Another problem is, you're never really sure exactly where you are in the product life cycle. And let me give you an example from my past. On the David sunflower seed business in 1986, someone had the brilliant idea, and I'm being sarcastic when I say that, to tout that because the product was introduced in 1926, this was the 60th anniversary. Well, who cares about 60th anniversary? 50th, sure. 75th, the 100th, sure. But 60th is kind of a weird, anniversary date to make any, splash. But for whatever reason, the decision was made, not by me, but the decision was made to put our 60th anniversary, on the package. One big benefit from that is it got us talking about this concept of product life cycle. You'd think a product that's been around for 60 years is a very, very mature product, but in reality, fewer than 15% of our target market had ever even tried the product. What that meant to me was, even though the product had been around for 60 years, we were still kind of in the introduction stage of the product life cycle. And one of the things that you want to do when you're in the introduction stage of the product life cycle is to do introductory tactics to get people to try the product. And out of all that discussion, we came up with a trial pack, a little teeny half-ounce package that sold for $0.10 that was incredibly successful at getting new people to try the product, because that's what you want to do during the introduction phase, get people to try the product. Well, that worked for us. Another question about where are you in the product life cycle, how about the iPhone? It's been around for 10 years, but it's not really the same phone that's been around for 10 years because every year or so they come out with a new version. So they kind of keep pushing back the concept of the product life cycle because they're coming out with a new version of the product. Sometimes products are cyclical. Fanta, Coca-Cola Company is pushing the flavored sodas, which were hugely popular in the 1930s and 40s, but then they really kind of fell into disfavor in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but now is it time for a renaissance there. But there's no doubt some products are, past their prime and they're definitely in decline. Very few people use traditional shaving products anymore, like to actually lather up with shaving soap. They prefer the convenience of shaving cream. So this is clearly a product that is on the decline. Certainly traditional chalkboards very much on the decline. Audio cassette tapes, who's got any machines that still play these things, definitely on the decline. But speaking of personal stereos, how about the iPod, the original iPod? Very few of those are sold because more and more people are just using their phones for music. But sometimes products can have life cycles that last very, very, very long. And the Coca-Cola Company would certainly be a great example of that with Coke, which was introduced in the late 19th century, but remains, very relevant today. Clearly, Coca-Cola in the United States is in the mature phase, but who's to say that they can't keep that mature phase going for decades and decades and decades, because they already have. Coke's been mature for quite a while. The product life cycle, it's important that you understand the concepts there, if for no other reason than when you're talking with other marketing people, that concept is going to come up and you don't want to sound like you're not, well versed in basic marketing concepts. But having said that, in my opinion, it definitely has some limitations for, applicable practice.